Hey guys, welcome back to the library. Let's jump into it. So I have a bone to pick. Skeleton Warriors lives a peculiar life in the PlayStation Library. On its surface, it's a licensed video game tied to a children's toy line. From a more granular exploration of its content, it's a mind-boggling mixture of difficulty, conflicting design choices, and infuriating, unfair punishments. If you're not very good at video games, trust me when I say, just use the cheat codes. Our review begins with the source material, the Skeleton Warriors toy line. Produced by Playmates Interactive, the same folks who brought us the original Ninja Turtles toys, it was a short-lived series with a limited but decent amount of product tie-ins. It included Marvel Comics, a cartoon show, and a smaller supplemental. An important note to the toy line is that it's one of the few runs where the bad guys outnumbered the good guys. I think that fact is where Neversoft took their inspiration for the game. Players will jump into the lead protagonist role with Prince Lightstar. It turns out the prince has an unruly baron that steals the Lightstar crystal, which powers all of Luminous City. What sets them on their path of good versus evil is the crystal's intriguing power that manipulates a person based on their alignment. Folks of good-hearted nature earn new powers like flight and energy blasts. Those of an evil disposition, however, are stripped of their flesh and organs and are reborn into a terrifying skeleton warrior. Now Dark Baron uses the crystal on everyone he can, including his henchmen in Dagger, Aracula, and Shriek. With a literal army of various skeleton types at his disposal, it's up to Justin Lightstar to stop the Baron's takeover of the entire world. Which is where we begin the review. Neversoft's approach to the subject matter admittedly irks me after researching for the review. The toy line had this amazing flamboyant color tone to them. Even dark, muddy colors popped. The cartoon series had a very He-Man and X-Men vibe to it, with colorful backgrounds and brighter, if slightly muted color tones for the character outfits. In the video game, everything is just flat. Partially due to the pre-rendered graphics used for characters, and partially due to them trying to go for a more realistic and gritty look. Sadly, that design aesthetic leads the way for the backgrounds, which are a hybrid of flat pre-renders and real-time polygons and textures. As a whole, the suite of graphical choices gives it a very drab and lifeless vibe. There's some nice texture work, don't get me wrong, but you won't be adding it to a top 5 greatest looking games list anytime soon. One of the bright points is the main gameplay mechanic. Lightstar can jump, swing his sword in a variety of ways, ceiling climb, and fire a burst from his sword. As the skeletons come at him, striking the killing blow shatters them into a variety of pieces, almost as a direct nod to the vintage Mortal Kombat. Where it gets interesting is their heartstones. If you do not collect their power source in time, they'll reassemble themselves and continue the fight. This adds just the tiniest amount of strategy in crowded fights, as you must duck and weave to snag the heartstones while keeping enemies at bay. Admittedly, this core mechanic of power collecting would be enough to carry the game if it weren't for the most asinine way the difficulty is set up. Let's take this in steps. First and foremost, there are no continues. You start with a few lives and may pick up additional power-ups to give more. Second is the health disparity taken versus the health given. On normal difficulty, a typical hit the Lightstar will wield 5 damage. The usual power-up only relieves 1. This means if you're hit 3 times, you would need to kill 15 enemies and hope all 15 of them drop a health item and not another heartstone. The ultimate crime, however, is what I have dubbed the Dead Man's Toll. Upon dying, you will be resurrected with 10 fewer heartstones to fire. Every time you die. At a minimum, the game does allow you to keep 10 on each return, but still, this stripping of supplies only feels worse if you try to play on hard, where it's 10 points of damage per hit. You are punished for being terrible, which removes a lot of the willingness to keep going and get better. On top of the various skeletons, other creatures follow along, including bats and wolves. The bats are particularly egregious as they blend in with many of the backgrounds, especially the first level. I've mistaken them for a flying skeleton part only to be whacked in the face by them. Some of the cartoon show's other existing races make guest appearances as sword fodder, but there's no real explanation for them being there in the first place. Now, in its defense, There are health power-ups that give sequentially more life back, but they're too far apart and usually rendered useless. Second on the crimes committed is the absurd uptick in difficulty out of nowhere. Not quite halfway through the game, enemies suddenly become projectile dispensers with multiple offenders on screen at once. Worse still, one of the game's suggestions betray you. Buried in the manual, the author highly recommends learning to properly block, where Lightstar holds the sword out in front of him. It can save you from said projectiles and stop many physical attacks. The problem comes when those same projectiles can bounce off and redirect or go around you while you're blocking. You can't change direction while you're blocking, so these yellow blob shots just beat your ass senseless. After what I think was roughly 25 to 40 restarts of a save state in the exact location with no hope visible, I said screw it, I slapped on the invincibility code and started from scratch. Now, judge me all you want, but being invincible while acting like I wasn't improved the game significantly. Once back at the choke point, I plowed on through and continued the quest free of worry and focused on the combat and a few sequences of the most evil platforming ever. As on cue, the game reared its ugly head once more now that I was invincible, and throws you to the depths of the most annoying platform patterns, platforms that drop you on contact, and angled walkways that don't play well with his hanging mechanic. One particular area was so heinous that were I not impervious to fall death, I would most certainly have removed the disc and snapped it in half. I would remind you, this is a video game based on a children's toy line. Being a 2.5 game with nifty scrolling tricks to create depth, you'd be shocked to know the Sega Saturn version is better. In comparing the games across both systems, Sega's black box introduces more visual effects with fog, a bit more scrolling in the background, and slightly sharper imagery. It doesn't help the case against the difficulty, but if you have both decks, you'll find the better fare across the aisle. Skeleton Warriors divides the game evenly across its 4 end bosses. Each gets 5 stages spread across side-scrolling, the bonus stage, and finally the boss. The bonus stages are a bit odd in concept. You're on the flying vehicles from the show trying to snag all the power-ups you can till the stage completes, or you die. You're not charged for the life, but you are still using up heartstones for the missiles on your ship. This somewhat defeats the purpose of the stage, making it feel like a last-minute addition, especially with how sparse the landscape is. Sound effects are standard fare, but one place the game does shine is the soundtrack. A beautifully crafted orchestration that sways between guitar rock and symphonic suites. It's a little hard to hear some of it over the constant barrage of exploding bones, but you can find it on YouTube thanks to various folks uploading it. Worth a separate listen. As an overall package, Skeleton Warriors is a game not only at war with itself, but its own rival release. While both suffer the same chaos and unbalanced difficulties, lopsided level design, and cruel punishments for being bad, the Saturn version is better than the PlayStation version visually. The PlayStation version does have better cinematics, with a caveat. Like other confusing design choices, it looks like the game shipped partially incomplete. After winning the fight against Shriek, Lightstar's eyes and parts of his cheekbones are gone. And then they come back in the next sequence. Were I forced to play through this without using cheat codes, the game would be instantly buried in the dustbin of yesteryear. But when they are activated and you can simply forget about your health, the game becomes an enjoyable, slower-paced crawl. There's something that the Hearthstone mechanic that I just can't resist. I honestly don't hate the game, and true thrill seekers will lap up the absurd difficulty spike and challenge without the assists. On Game-Rave's review scale, it's an average 5 out of 10. Activate invincibility and give it a once through. Alright guys, that does it for me. Episode 199 is where we reveal the first step to a better Game-Rave tomorrow. Take care, and I'll see you guys. I have to know.